Hello everyone, this is Paul the Okanite coming to you once again with some gaming goodness. Today I present to you the Battle of Shiloh, April 6th and 7th, 1862. It was here that the 40,000-man Army of Mississippi under General Albert Sidney Johnston executed a surprise dawn attack on General Ulysses Sam Grant's 45,000-man Army of Tennessee. Minus Lew Wallace's division, which was posted about 5 miles from the battlefield, the armies were pretty equal in strength on April 6, with a small advantage going to Johnston. When the attack was launched, no senior officer in Grant's army, not even Grant himself, believed that there was any Confederate state soldiers within 20 miles. Accordingly, there were no vedettes, there were no skirmish lines deployed, and no cavalry screens. Just camps of Union soldiers wiping the sleep from their eyes with a Confederate army en line about 1.5 miles away, approaching mostly undetected. Our game of choice is Shiloh, published by Worthington Games, and I hope to get through the first and generally decisive day of fighting over the course of 2 or 3 episodes. To keep things fun, I will focus on the good stuff, editing out dice rolls and counting movement points. Instead, I will keep focused on the flow of the game and how our battle is developing. The Battle of Shiloh is a fantastic battle to explore from a gamer's perspective. While the armies are substantial, this really is only a medium-sized battle relative to the later battles in the war. Unlike Gettysburg, which is one of the hardest battles to fight along historical lines after its first day, Shiloh games play like the actual battle unfolded. April 6th, the Confederate States Army launches its attack, attempting to isolate and kill Grant's army by taking Pittsburgh Landing. By dawn of April 7th, the wayward General Lew Wallace finally arrives with Grant's 6th Division of about 7,000 men, and Don Carlos Buell's entire Army of the Ohio arrives at Pittsburgh Landing with an additional 17,000 men to reinforce Grant, sealing the doom of Johnston's attack. So let's take a look at the battlefield and get started. And here you can see Grant's army at Shiloh that are all camped out in their various camps all around the battlefield. We have a couple gunboats down here to harass the Confederates that get close enough, but basically the Union is sitting here fat, dumb, and happy. If we look on the turn track, we see a big pile of units, and that's what comes in at night and just before night at the end of the first day. So that's all the stuff that's going to be coming in later. And you can see it's quite a lot. But right now, Grant kind of has what he has. The Confederates are in their line of battle, 2 deep. We have the 3rd Corps, and they called them corps. They really were divisions. It was a feeble attempt to fool the Union that they had more troops than they really had by calling them corps rather than divisions. But by the nomenclature used, the Confederates had corps but no divisions, and the Union had divisions but no corps, but it all worked out kind of the same. Here's 2nd Corps for the Confederates. They lined them up kind of in a Napoleonic fashion, one line in front of the other. Just off map, we have the Confederate 1st Corps, as well as the Reserve Corps, and 3 largish cavalry regiments, one of which is Bedford Forrest. As far as how the game operates, we have 3 levels of elevation on the map, one of which is just up and down the edge of the map, which we see here, so it basically does nothing. So we're really dealing with 2 levels of elevation. The rules use basically wedding cake line of sight. Worthington has put a version 1.3b rule set out there. I will be using what I have, which is rule set 1.1, with a couple exceptions. One exception is that I am going to use the wedding cake line of sight, which I think is what they're kind of feebly still trying to describe in their rule books. The only exception is that artillery cannot shoot over friendly troops that are adjacent to the target hex, but that's about it. With only 2 levels of elevation and woods everywhere which block line of sight, all these woods block line of sight, there's really not much opportunity for offensive artillery fire. The sequence of play goes all the way back to great battles of the American Civil War, pretty much. You start with the command phase for command radius of 4, then there's an administrative phase, which the only thing that happens in that phase in this particular game. It's the alert rolls for the Union camps. Confederates, when they get within 5, if they end the turn within 5, the Union is going to get to roll to wake up. We'll get to that in a little bit. Followed by offensive artillery fire, followed by movement, followed by defensive fire, followed by offensive fire, but not the artillery they shot earlier. And finally, screwing people's heads back on, rally phase for anybody who is routed of the side that's active. That's it. I think let's go ahead and start. Everybody's in command on turn 1. It is 0500 in the morning. They're starting their movements. We are within 5 here. So what I propose to do is to back off and circle around and have this 3rd Corps kind of line up over here. Okay, and they will be attacking this way towards Sherman, who is the 1st Division up over here. And then we have these guys who I propose to go right down the road and hit Sherman from this direction. So from like kind of over hitting Sherman, which is this division camped out over here. As far as the follow-on divisions go, I'm going to have them go down the road. And the 1st Corps is going to hit these guys here. And the Reserve Corps is going to keep on going down the road, all the way down the road, and come back and get into the action around the peach orchard. So that's the battle plan. Let's see how it goes. So everybody's in command. Confederates have nothing organizationally do. They never will. The only thing that happens there is Union alerts. So we're going to do movements. So turn 1 movement. And as you can see, I have gone ahead and moved the 3rd Corps over in the direction I'd indicated earlier. Each corps is color-coded, and each division is color-coded for the Union. That's the orange stripe on the top side of the unit. The name underneath is the higher level commander. The name in the orange box, in this case, is the brigade commander. Strength is in increments of 100 troops, so this particular brigade, Woods Brigade, has 2,300 troops in it. I think that since this was so early in the war, the brigades were bigger. They hadn't got attrition down yet to where they were later in the war, and probably after this very battle, that the brigades were all getting kind of smaller after this battle. And here we have the 2nd Corps. Again, I'm going to have him approach Sherman from this direction. And then 1st Corps going on down the road and making the turn. Making the turn into the next division down the line. This is Prentice. Peabody was about the only brigade level commander or higher that actually had a clue what was going on. He actually did some reconnaissance. And his division commander angrily accused him of bringing on the battle. And he said, well, if I brought on the battle, I'll be in the van. He saluted, got his brigade in line, and promptly went out, did some fighting, and got himself killed. So the Confederate move is now done. No Confederate unit has ended within 5 of a Union unit, so there is no chance of a Union activation. We're done with the move. There's no shooting on either side. There's no rallies necessary. On to Union player turn. Union player turn 1. Nothing's happening because nobody's gotten within the activation range. We're on to turn 2. That was easy. Starting with the command control for the Confederates. Nothing. There never will be anything organizationally for them. I'm not going to say that anymore, so we can skip that. And we're on to Confederate offensive artillery. None of that. On to movement for the Confederates. I'll go ahead and execute the 2nd move. This time I will be getting within activation range. The idea was I want to be able to have lots of force hitting them all at once. And so I delayed the 3rd Corps waking up anybody because I want to have 3 formations getting ready to hit them all at once. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Corps with the Reserve Corps taking more time to do an end run. There's different ways you can do this. One of the cool things is that you can actually have different attack plans for the Confederate. You can weight your attack one way or the other. until you get within 5 of the Union, you have the time to do what you want if you're willing to take the time. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this movement. Confederate movement for turn 2 is complete. You can see we went ahead and moved Wood and Claiborne up over here, getting ready to hit Sherman. The 3rd Brigade of the Corps is Shaver, and he's over here with his 3rd Corps commander. The game includes multiple commanders for some formations. Leaders are guys that have the star instead of a number, okay? And what that's telling you is that, all right, he's a leader. He does 2 things. One is command control. That first phase is tracing radius to troops under his command. Radius is 4 for a leader that was there at the start of the game. Replacement leaders, if they take a casualty, have a radius of 3. The second thing leaders do is add 1 to the morale of the units they're stacked with. Stacking is only 1, so leaders add 1 to the morale of the units they're stacked with, and stacking is 1 unit per hex, 1 combat unit per hex. That's it. Movement points are 6 points for infantry and limbered artillery. Cavalry and leaders have 9 movement points. But on this particular map, movement is going to be slow because all of the woods, it all counts as 2. It takes 2 to move through them. Moving out of an enemy zone of control costs an extra movement point. There is no facing in this game, and there are zones of control going all the way around all combat units, with the exception of routed combat units that don't have a zone of control. All right, so we've done our moves. So we've got the 2nd Corps that's moved up. We've got cavalry and artillery in trail. They hadn't brigaded the cavalry yet as of this battle. So both the Confederates and the Union have cavalry that's pretty much attached to, say, a division, or in this case, a corps, because the Confederates didn't have divisions. One exception are these 3 units here, which are basically Army-level cavalry. 3 big regiments is what I think they are, 700, 700, and 600 men, including Nathan Bedford Forrest. Notice that he has a gold box around his strength. Most others have black, and several have green. Those are the 3 morale levels. Those are the 3 morale levels. So for Forrest to fail, or he's got to roll a 10. This game uses a 10-sided die. Wharton's got to roll an 8 or better to fail his morale, and so does Adams because he has a black box around his strength. Whenever a unit takes roughly 50% casualties, he has to flip. And you can see the effect is if first off his morale goes down, but second off, he can no longer be used as an offensive unit. He may no longer enter an enemy zone of control once, in game terms, once the unit is shattered by taking approximately 50% casualties. So one of the things that the Union wants to do is inflict 50% casualties, and even though there's Confederates left, they're not going to be useful in the attack because they can't enter a zone of control to prosecute their attacks. All right. Down here, we've gone ahead and taken the 1st Corps, and as I indicated, we're going to be going after Prentice's division that's in camp. And finally, we have the Reserve Corps doing the end run and going to be coming up towards the Peach Orchard. So we've done our movement. The next thing would be defensive fire. There is none. Offensive fire. There is none. Rallies. There aren't any. We're on to the Union part of turn 2, and I can just tell you that the first thing that the Union needs to do is in that administrative phase after you trace command control. We do have a couple guys out of command control. There is a Sherman unit down here, and there is an unbrigaded element down here, an unbrigaded element of Prentice's command down here, both of which are going to be out of command. That's really not going to hurt them that much. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. So what I want to do now is do the wake-up rolls. It's a 20% chance per roll. Now, the rules are a little wonky here. The rules, if you read them literally, say each Union unit gets to roll a die for each Confederate unit within 5 hexes with a 20% chance of success per roll. I think what it really means to say is that each Union unit, should a Confederate be within 5, rolls a single die with a 20% chance of success. Remember, in reality, the only brigade level formation that actually activated at this point would be Peabody. Okay? He was the only one out of this whole army that pulled it off. So I'm going to say it's 20% per unit that has a guy within 5. You know, I may be right, I may be wrong, but even the designer says that this game is 60% favorable to the Union as far as winning the game. So I don't feel too bad about that. If I give the Confederates a little nudge to even it out, I'm okay with that. All right, I'm going to roll some dice. Of all the units that are within 5 of Confederates, I've had 2 activate, and they are actually by each other. Hildebrand from Sherman's command, as well as Buckland, with Sherman stacked with Hildebrand. So these units will be able to move in the Union movement phase. They are now fully active. The rest of Sherman's command will not activate until next turn. Once a brigade of a division activates, the next turn the entire division will activate. They are not in such a bad place right where they are. They're kind of in line with these other sleeping Sherman's units. So I don't see any need to move them. There is not going to be any shooting. Notice that they are green. So you can see that they have a green box around their strength number, which means that their morale will require them to roll a 1 through 5. With Sherman stacked with Hildebrand, he'd be a 1 through 6. That's it for the Federal turn 2. We are now on to 0700 turn 3, which is actually historically when the troops started really making contact. So we're right in there with what happened in the historical battle. It is now turn 3, 0700, and we are in the Confederate movement phase for that turn. There's no command radius issues. There's no other issues, no offensive artillery fire. We are moving Confederate units into contact with the Union troops. As we see, we're already approaching them here. We may get some guys in contact with this Sherman unit down here. That is the Sherman unit. Yes, it is. And this belongs here. He is out of command. We're going to be making contact with the main body of Sherman up here with 2 corps. So let's go ahead and get that done, and we're going to start having some shots happening. And the Confederates have made contact with the Union Army, as we can see here, hitting the guys still in their camps. That will have an effect that they're in their camps. The other guys are fully awake. They will get to shoot. But we do not pick up the encampment when the guys wake up. Their encampment markers are stacked underneath them. That means they're active, but it also means that the Confederates, when they go in that hex, and should the Union retreat out of that hex, they have to go into a hex with an encampment. They are required to make straggler rolls. So all through the first day, the Confederates, time and time again, were wasting time having their troops looting encampments, trying to get whatever goodies they could from the encampments left behind by the Union soldiers. So that is simulated in this game. So it looks like the Confederates have moved. We now have defensive fire from the 2 active Union brigades that activated at the approach of the Confederates earlier. We've also bucked up against these guys, which is Prentice's command, and we did not make it over here to make contact with anyone. That's fine. That was not expected. So we're going to go ahead and we're not going to be doing anything down here with the Reserve Corps. Now, remember once again, movement is 6 movement points for the infantry units. So typically with the woods costing 2 points and woods being just about everywhere, you're going to get 3 hexes on a good day. Going up elevation costs an additional point. So all these guys that move, say from here to here, paid an additional point. So even though that's clear, moving from there to there cost them 2, just like it did moving through the woods. And if there were woods in that hex they moved into going up, it would cost them 3. So movement is a little slow, but usually you're not going to be too far from opposing troops, so it's really not that big a deal. Here, if you can see the cavalry unit, I went ahead and paid to dismount him. So I paid, of his 9 points, I paid 2 points to go ahead and dismount him, and now he moves like infantry. And then up here, you can see the Confederate Army attached cavalry. They're just kind of sashaying around in the background. They were the last on the map. And we have the Army commander, Johnston, who they're tracing command from. All right, let's go ahead and talk about shooting. First off, there are no melees in this game. It's all shooting and possibly retreating and doing morale checks. When a defending unit, not an attacking unit, but when a defending unit retreats out of a hex, the attacker has the option, but not the obligation, of going into the vacant hex. Exception, when there's a Union encampment in that hex, the Confederates are required to go in and loot the camp. Here is the combat results table. And basically what you do is you total the firing factors from all the units that want to fire into the hex. I don't see anywhere it says it's required that you can only do one shot against the defender. It's just that this table, I think, is more friendly to you if you do. These woods also carry a -2 on the die rolls on the attack. So if you're splitting yourself up and doing multiple attacks, you're also getting multiple -2s, one on each and every die roll that you do. So tendency is, and I think it makes sense, is to go ahead and do these big attacks. You can't roll lower than a 1, even if you're adjusted. So you're guaranteed a hit. Or at least the M is a morale check, at least with 25 to 28 attacking points. Even with a -2 going into the woods, you're guaranteed at least a morale check, and that can be important. Down here, if you roll well, the R means that, in this case, you do the 3 hits, but the defender also has to retreat 2 hexes. He also has to make a morale check, and if he blows the morale check, he retreats another 3 hexes in routed status. Not a whole lot of die roll modifiers. Here's a -2 for the woods, you see. +1 if the target is fired on from 3 or more adjacent hexes. That's kind of a flank shot. There's no formations in this game. Even though there are some rules for road movement. I haven't touched on that. I don't think I need to. But 3 adjacent hexes firing into a target does get a +1. And shooting at limbered artillery gets you a column shift. That's it. That's really it for the combat modifiers. So this game is simplicity itself in a lot of ways. All right. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and execute the shots. And you're going to see how I do this. And I do this when I actually play the game. There's no paper bookkeeping in this game, but you do have to keep track of hits. And you do that over here on this chart, digits, tens, and hundreds. And that's victory points. That works out to victory points. Rather than do that each and every time I take a shot, I like to group it, and I take care of that at the end of the player turn. Let me show you how I do that. So for Union defensive fire, I have decided to combine Buckland and Hildebrand and shoot at whoever's under good old Braxton Bragg here. This would be Pond. Okay, so Buckland and Hildebrand are going to shoot at Pond. And let's just put the leader underneath just so you can see what's going on. All right, we have Buckland with 20 points, 2,000 men, and Hildebrand with 1,700 men. They're going to combine, and they're going to be on the 33 plus column. We have Pond in the woods, as most of the times the defender will be in the woods. And so he's going to get a -2 on this die roll. But it is a guaranteed hit. So what I also like to do is I roll 2 dice of 2 different colors, 10-sided each. One is morale, the other is the hit. And should the hit be effective, I've already got the morale die rolled, so it's just faster. Here we go. Oh, I rolled a 10 for the hit and a 4 for morale. So since the morale on Pond, he's got a black box. That means his morale is 7. So he passes that morale check. But I did roll a 10 on a maximum table, -2 for the woods. It is a 3R result. Okay, so that means he's going to take 3 hits. What I do, you're going to see because we're going to have lots of shots and lots of casualties happening soon. But I use my flame markers. These are the shooters. That's the target. And when I do the shots, you're going to see that I keep the flame markers on the shooters as I go up and down the line. That way I keep my place. The guy who's getting shot at right now has the red flame. I rolled the dice. He got the R result. He got the 3 hits. At this point, Pond is going to retreat his 2 hexes. he is not routed. He passed his morale check. If he had blown his morale check, he would have gone back another 2 hexes. And I go ahead and take a handy dandy die, and I got lots of these, and just signify that he took 3 hits. So I don't try to do the accounting until the end of the player turn. I don't even change the marker under the unit. So at this point, that was all the shooting that the Union had. None of these guys that are in the camps can fire. So that's it for shooting for the defensive fire for the Union. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply the 3 hits to pond and slide the counters to 3 guys down on the tally markers on the map. So I've gone ahead and tallied the 3 hits, and I have reduced the strength of the unit. And at this point, I take off all of these things because the player turn is done. The one thing that I forgot to do is that when you roll a 0 on the hit table and there's a leader in the hex, it's a possible leader casualty. Basically, it's a single roll of the die, 7 or more, and the leader is down. I rolled a 2, so unfortunately for the Confederate Army, Braxton Bragg is still okay. So, all right, so that's all the defensive fire. The guy's still in camp. The guy's not alert, not awake. They don't do anything. We're up to the Confederate offensive fire. So, just to show you, my first shot is going to be with Claiborne and Wood against McDowell, who's under the encampment marker. Because McDowell is still encamped, he does not get any defensive benefit for terrain. So there will be no -2 on the roll. So I will go ahead and roll. I roll a 6 on the hit. It's on the maximum column. A 6. Looking here is 3R. So it's another 3R. All right. So he's going to retreat 2. I rolled a 7 for the morale. That means his morale is good. He would have needed to roll an 8 or worse, because this, or unless he's green. Let me see. No, he's the guy. He's the only guy with Sherman, I think, who isn't green. All right. The camp stays there. First, McDowell is going to go back 2. That is the R result. And now, since he passed his morale check, that's as far as he goes. And I'm going to give him his 3-hit marker. So now he has his 3-hit marker. And at the end of the Confederate fires, I'm going to go ahead and do the accounting. So we can see here, next guy on the hit parade is Buckland. So basically, I'm going to go down the line. Every shooter, I'm going to put a flame marker on as my placeholder, so I know, that they're shooting. And I will put the one that has that I painted the base red on the defender. Execute it, put the die on it, execute any morale checks or retreats, and go on to the next guy. That's how I do this, and I'll get back to you when it's done. And what we see here is the result of the Confederate offensive fire. The units with the dice on them are the defenders that have taken hits. The units with the little flame markers on them are the shooters. A couple things happened that are of note that I want to bring to your attention. We had 2 artillery batteries for the Union that routed as a result of being hit. When that happens, the artillery unit flips to its limbered side. When it's in the zone of control, it flips to the limbered side, takes an extra hit because it's artillery unit that is being forced out, and then executes its retreat. That happened with 2 artillery units. Then there was an infantry unit that routed, and there was no way out of the predicament they were in other than to go through an enemy zone of control. For each hex of zone of control that it has to travel through, it takes an extra hit. So the unit took, I think it was probably this guy, he took 3 hits, and because he had to go to a zone of control, he had an R result, so that pushed him 2 hexes, and then he routed, so he had to go 5 hexes. Because he went through 1 zone of control on the way out of there, he took an extra hit, bringing him up to 4. The last thing that I haven't done yet, and this should be done as you're doing the fires, but I wanted to show you here, and it didn't really make any difference, is we do have these abandoned camps. They were units that were pushed out. They routed away or they retreated away. So in each of those cases, it is an obligatory move for the Confederate to advance into that hex. In other cases, It is optional to go forward if the defender vacates the hex, but in the case of an encampment, it is an obligatory move for the Confederate to go in there and then suffer a roll for stragglers. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Each time you roll on the straggler table for these forced encampment looting moves, there's a 30% chance of receiving 1 hit and 20% chance of receiving 2 hits and 50% of no hits at all. In this case, only 1 hit was delivered. That would be that red die that you're looking at. And then the encampments are lifted up off the map. Each encampment only triggers this effect 1 time during the game. All right, at this point, I'm going to pick up all the flame markers because they're not needed anymore. I'm going to do the accounting for casualties, and then I'm going to mark down the unit's strength. So at the end of the Confederate fire phase for 0700, turn 3, they've made good progress beating up on Sherman over here on the north side of the map and have pretty much pushed them out of all their encampments all the way down to where Sherman himself is with Hildebrand. But Hildebrand has taken hits. Moving on down to Prentiss, we see that Peabody held, but the other brigade left. So there's only 1 brigade over here in this whole area, which is bad for the Federals. So it's basically pretty vaporous where all these camps were. Meanwhile, we have a whole corps that's not been engaged yet. They're going to come over here. The Union is going to have to figure out how to screen this off. What's going to happen for activation is any division that was attacked, the entire division is going to wake up in the Union half of the turn. So that will help some. But as we get to the encampments over here, these are other divisions that have not been attacked. They will get to roll their 20% chance per unit, but they will not wake up the entire division. Maybe we'll have some pieces parts wake up, but probably not all of it. All right, so that is the Confederate firing for turn 3. The Confederates have nobody routed, so there's no rallies to do. We're on to the Federal command phase, and so I'm going to take a look at the command situation. I don't think anyone went out of command. One thing to note, that when this guy routed, he had his leader with him, and the leader routed with him, which is an option. Another option is to put the leader with another unit of the same formation. So in this case, it would be the same division. So the leader has the option of not going back with the guy that routed. In this case, I decided to do it because the rest of his guys would still be in command control even if he went back. And taking him back will give him a +1 on his rally attempt at the end of the Union player turn. All right, we're good on command control. If we're not, I'll mark it, but I think we're good. Then we've got the wake-up phase. So I'm going to do the wake-up phase and see what the situation is as far as Union activity. All right, so at this point, all of Sherman automatically wakes up. There was a cavalry unit up here. That might be about it. I think the artillery unit had already been woken up. Yeah, he did. He ran away. And the rest of Prentiss woke up, including this unbrigaded guy that's way down here out of command. And for Sherman, Stewart also is awake. He's likewise out of command at the other end of the battlefield for some reason. Let's see. And that's it. So now we have the units that we can actually move around with on turn 3 for the Yankees. Clearly, they're going to be going back. This is going to be a retrograde movement and set up for the next turn. So now we see that Stewart, that guy from Sherman who's down here, what I'm going to call the south end of the map, actually it's east, but I'm calling it south, fell back 1 from his encampment to just try to be in a little bit better position to manage these guys, because they're going to be coming. We have 1 cavalry regiment from Sherman from Prentiss that dismounted, and he's going to try to slow down. He'll act like a speed bump maybe. And we have Peabody. Whereas he took some hits, he's still in good order, and he fell back from his encampment. Remember to pay the extra 1 point when you leave a zone of control. So that 2 hex move took the entire 6 movement points to get there. And The rest of Sherman kind of fanned out and hopefully going to be a speed bump for what's coming next. And McClernand's one guy, Wraith, that activated, he did not go into the line, but he shifted right because we have all these wide open spaces here and we can easily have guys coming to greet us. Let's not forget there's a bunch of Confederate cavalry there that if they want to bring an army commander along to keep him in command, they can cause a problem. Regarding command control, for our purposes in this particular game, it really does two things. One, units that are not in command control cannot enter a zone of control of an enemy unit. So that means they're not attacking anybody. Second, it means that they can't use any road movement advantages. Everything is straight cost of terrain. So basically they move slower when they're trying to move around, when they're out of command. And that is pretty much it. They can shoot both offensively and defensively. All right, so now we've done the Union move. There is no shooting. Everybody pulled back, and you're going to see that in this game. The Union is going to be trading away space to get time to burn up the turns in the game and to lower the attrition rate to something that they can manage. So the Union broke contact all up and down the line. There is no firing. At the same time, they gave up a little bit of space to buy this turn for themselves and get their line in order. And also by pulling back, it means that the Confederates don't have the opportunity to mess up their line with a good defensive fire shot. Remember, firing range for infantry is 1, and almost everything in this game is going to be infantry fire at range 1. There's a few places where artillery will come into play, but in general, it's going to be infantry shooting at range 1. All right, so now we are rallying. We're doing rally rolls for all these Union units. I'm going to take care of that, and we're on to turn 4, 0800. So all the Union troops rallied. In fact, in 2 cases, they only rallied because the leader was with them. So having the leaders with units that are trying to rally can make all the difference. And so this was a really good thing for the Union. Pretty much no matter what happens in the next turn, they should have enough units to plug the holes. For the Confederate turn, everybody's in command control. There's no issues with that. There is no offensive artillery fire for them. We're on to Confederate movement for 0800. And the Confederates have moved. We can see in this area the Confederates are putting all kind of pressure on Sherman. However, we will have McClernand's division activating in the Union part of the turn, so that'll help out some. All kind of pressure all through here on the Union units. And not much different as we go to the south central part of the battlefield. And finally, way down here, we've actually made contact with Stuart. So the Stuart's brigade from Sherman's division is now in contact with Trabue, who is an elite unit, so they tend not to run. We are now up to Union defensive fire. And with the Union fire, a total of 6 hits were delivered, adding to the 5 that the Confederates already have. It'll bring them up to 11. Most noteworthy was the shot that good old Peabody delivered to Steffens. He not only routed him, but he also retreated him, so that's 5 hexes back with 3 hits. Other than that, it was just kind of onesie-twosie. I'm going to go ahead and mark those, and we'll have the Confederates shoot. And the Southerners got big hits up and down the line. We had three baggers. All 3 of them had to retreat, although they did not rout. But because they retreated, the Confederates got to move into the hexes, so they got some free advances. And we have just another hit here where the guy didn't leave. Another one here, the guy didn't leave. And Stuart routed, taking 2 hits. So altogether, it is 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 13 hits, bringing the Union up to 29 hits versus 11. So the Confederates are taking a decent-sized lead as far as the casualties inflicted. All right, let me mark it up, and we go on to rallies for the Confederate, of which there is only 1. So in the Union part of the 0800 turn 4, we have Hurlbut's division. Wake up. we get two divisions woken up. We're going to pick Hurlbut and who is this? McClernand up here to try to bolster this faltering line. One division left plus some in sundries that are attached to Army. That would be the guys back here. Everything wakes up next turn. There is no Union offensive artillery fire. It's time for the Union to move. And once again, the Union has disengaged from this, trying to buy themselves some more time and lower the casualty rate. We have McClernand, who is taking responsibility for this gap that is now at least semi-closed. We have Sherman next in line. He's kind of over in this area. And then Prentice, who is over here. And then finally, another new division, Hurlbut, who is taking over the most direct route to Pittsburgh Landing, which is right here. Again, the Confederates take Pittsburgh Landing, game over. It's that simple. The Union has done their moves. There is no shooting. Therefore, we will go ahead and do the rallies. I see just one of them. I'll take care of that. We move on to the 0900 turn, which would be turn 5. But I think that is enough for today. While we only got through 4 turns, with all the groundwork now laid, the remaining turns should go much quicker. But I'll leave those for another episode. If you like this playthrough so far, please subscribe as there is more coming. Give a thumbs up or leave a comment. All are appreciated. So come back again for the second part of the playthrough of Worthington Publishing's Shiloh. For now, however, I simply wish you all a pleasant evening.